Check out FlipsideGaming.com for all your gaming needs. Use the promo code HEROES to save 10% on all orders over $10. Additionally, there's a special Black Friday promo code for Magic Singles. From November 22nd to November 26th, you can use the promo code HEROESBF to get 15% off Magic Singles. During that time, there will also be site-wide discounts on sleeves, deck boxes, playmats, sealed product, and much more. See the description below for more details. Hey there, this is John from Heroes and Legends, and welcome to part 3 of our 6-part Ultimate Masters full set review, where today we're going to talk about all of the cards that are within black, as well as some of the multicolor cards. If you've been watching the series all along, you know what to expect here. This is a limited set review. These are all reprints. We know what they do within the formats where they are already legal. We're going to look at each card individually and discuss how it's going to fit best into the limited environments, drafts, and sealed. Quickly before we get started, just a fast reminder, if you check out the description below, you'll find a few ways to help support the channel. Our Patreon page is down there. You're also going to find links to products on Amazon, including Ultimate Masters. And Flipside Gaming still offering a promo code. You saw it at the beginning of the video. There's also a special promo code for singles this weekend. But they do have some boxes of Ultimate Masters still. And if you use that Heroes promo code, you can get them for $270 shipped. Pretty good price overall if you're still looking. But as always, thank you not only to the folks that look at those links, but to each and every one of you. I appreciate all the viewers. So thank you. And let's get into it. Appetite for brains. What a nice way to start. So here's the question for a card like this. We know this is a good card. All the cards in the set are good cards. But when you're dealing with so many powerful cards, will you actually play this in draft or sealed? I think the answer is sometimes. It's an interesting sideboard card if my opponent is maybe on a reanimation plan and I'm trying to exile their big reanimation target and I hopefully just can hit it at the right time. That's one way to look at this card, and I would side it in those circumstances. Another way to look at it is maybe I would main deck this in a Dimir build sometimes, because some of the Dimir builds I think are going to be a little more controlling. They're going to try to mill yourself until you hit maybe a reanimation target, and then your plan is to reanimate and control the board up until that point. And if that's the case, then maybe I do play this. It might be good enough in some builds there, especially in sealed. However, I think a lot of the time, the other cards in this set are just too powerful. I don't know if I see myself doing this. It only costs 1, it gives you information, it has the exile, I like all of that. But the fact you can only exile a converted mana cost card 4 or greater takes away the ability to really make your opponent stumble early on by taking away their 2 or 3 drop. And even if I had to pay 2 or 3 for an effect like that, I would be on board. But even though I'm paying only 1, I don't know if it's going to do enough a lot of the time, unfortunately. There's a lot of good cheap cards in this set, as you'll see going forward. Apprentice Necromancer. Very good card to look at to figure out what Black's trying to do in this set. Black's all about using the graveyard as a resource and juggling those resources as much as possible. That looks different in different colors, and this is a very unique set. I'm not going to say that there's a lot of cookie cutter archetypes like you typically see nowadays in Magic within these sets. There's a lot more fluidity here, and there's a lot of cards that can fit into multiple archetypes, and you're going to see that as we go through the video today, much like we saw over the last couple parts too. Now, this particular card, you could argue, is better in a couple places. Maybe this is actually pretty good in the white-black deck, because that's a reanimation-focused archetype. You're going to have a lot of opportunities to reanimate stuff out of your graveyard. Black's going to help you populate your graveyard a little bit. And in this case, it's only a very temporary reanimation, but white's very good at juggling some of these small creatures. You might be able to pull this off a couple times over the course of the game, and that gets interesting. This could also be good in Rakdos, because Rakdos does have an aristocrat's feel to it. Red has a lot of ways to be able to gain advantage through sacrifice, and this is a card that brings a creature back. You get to use it once, and then you have to lose it anyway, so maybe you can sacrifice it to something else. With that being said, though, blue wouldn't be bad either, because you mill yourself a lot, you're going to have a lot of targets potentially, and green's all about populating the graveyard too with a different outcome, but this card could take advantage of that too. Kind of fits in everywhere. Bitter Blossom. Okay, now this is a mythic. You're not going to see this a whole lot. If you've ever played with this card, you know how insane it can be. If you put this down on turn 2, there's a good chance you're just going to win. Now, the idea here is, sure, I could throw this in a Rakdos deck. It gives me little creatures to sacrifice, and there you go. But honestly, I wouldn't even be concerned with that. If I get this, I'm playing it, and my whole goal here is to just overwhelm and outrun my opponent. Bloodflow Connoisseur. This one's not super thrilling to me. If I want to populate my graveyard, and maybe Golgari would be the most interested at populating the graveyard at all costs, then this could be okay, and you can sacrifice it to itself, so do make note of that. But a 1/1 for 3, even though I could grow it over time, it doesn't have evasion. You're not playing it for that reason, though. You're trying to build up a graveyard, and that's why you would play this. Golgari could take those cards then, maybe do a big delve spell, or take the creatures in there and turn them into 1/2 spiders with spider spawning or something like that. So there is reason to play this card, but I think it's a little more niche. Bridge from Below. This is a cool card, and you know what it does in Constructed Magic. How about those Bridgevine decks, right? They've been very good in Modern recently, but is it good in Limited? When a creature is put into an opponent's graveyard from the battlefield, then you have to exile this out of your graveyard. So you're going to see that happening a lot more, and perhaps pretty consistently in Limited games generally. So I think that hurts Bridge from Below here. But if you can get this into your graveyard, which shouldn't be all that hard, especially if you're playing blue-black, again, you have a lot of mill opportunities there, and a lot of discard outlets and such, then it gets there, and when things die, you get to replace them with 2/2 black zombie tokens. Also could be good in Rakdos, obviously. You could sacrifice maybe smaller creatures that you don't care about, or creatures for other benefits, and on top of it, you get a 2/2 black zombie token. Pretty decent. There's also a card that's going to enhance zombies, but it is a mythic. We'll get to that later, so I wouldn't really worry about that, but it's a consideration, I guess. So, would I play Bridge from Below in certain builds? Yeah, probably. I might try it out in a Rakdos build here or there, but I don't know if it's always going to make my cut, honestly. Buried Alive. Alright, it's up to 3 creature cards right into the graveyard from the library for 3 mana at sorcery speed. This is going to be tremendous if you want to reanimate. White-black reanimation will definitely be an archetype, and this is going to help you populate that graveyard. You're going to see today that black has ways to reanimate, but white might even be more efficient because they have resurrection at common. So if you have a common reanimation spell, that's going to go a long way for that reanimation strategy if you're playing draft or sealed, especially sealed. It does other things though. Again, I mentioned Golgari earlier. Golgari is all in on populating the graveyard. They're going to be using dredge spells, and then they have payouts like delve spells, as well as like other things. I mentioned spider spawning earlier, for example. But they really, at all costs, want to get stuff in the graveyard. This does help you do that. But so much of the set revolves around graveyard mechanics. I could make an argument for this card in maybe any archetype. Chainer's Edict. Very good card with flashback here. I'm very interested in this for Dimir because, again, Dimir's a little more controlling. And being able to mill myself, if I mill into this, I can still cast it. So that's actually pretty sweet. Remember, if you mill a flashback card, it's almost like drawing a card. You're able to use it. Now remember, the economy isn't always great because sometimes flashback is expensive, but at least you can use it. It gives you options, especially later in the game. Now, this card itself, yeah, Chainer's Edict is awesome, right? It's a great removal spell. Sometimes it loses steam as the game goes on, though, because if your opponent has a lot of small creatures they don't care about anymore, it just doesn't matter at certain points. But you know what? Many times in this particular set, I think you're going to see people that are playing less creatures and maybe trying to get a big reanimation target or something like that. All of a sudden, this card gets a lot better. I would play this in most decks. Also, you can target yourself with this, which might come into play occasionally. Crow of Dark Tidings. Alright, this is a sweet card in this particular set because of what it does. 2/1 flyer for 3. When it enters the battlefield, mill 2. When it dies, mill 2. There's a lot of opportunity to mill here, especially if you juggle a little bit. So again, a card that fits very elegantly into a number of different strategies. White-black would be interested because you're trying to populate the graveyard for reanimation. White-blue might be interested. Maybe you're trying to mill yourself down to a Laboratory Maniac win or something like that. Black-red has a lot of flashback cards. You might find value there. Black-green wants to populate the graveyard at all costs for advantage, and it's perfect in that deck. This might be best in Golgari or Dimir, but it's going to be a solid card for a lot of builds. Dark Dabbling. This one's interesting. It's not necessarily great in all these builds, but I could see maybe a more aggressive Rakdos build. Sometimes there's a lot of haste creatures in red, for example. Even later in this video, we're going to see some red-black cards that fall into that type of strategy. Then this could be good to just keep the pressure on and be able to regenerate your team if there's a lot of blocks going on. So that's one way to look at this card. Or you just simply bring it in if your opponent has a lot of removal and you want to protect a creature from pinpoint removal. You can do that. And also cantrips. There's nothing wrong with that. I don't know if I use this in my main deck, though, unless I'm all in on a very aggressive strategy, but I could side it in under some circumstances for sure. Spell Mastery makes this card better, and I don't think it will be that hard to achieve in this set. Death Denied. Maybe best in Dimir. You're going to be playing more of a control-style deck typically in those colors, and this is an instant. It's also an arcane spell that could come into play from time to time, so don't forget that. But it's pretty cool because you could mill yourself with Dimir quite a bit, and then have a situation where maybe later on, if the game's going long, you can bring some creatures back to your hand, replay them. It's just value. Golgari will like this too because, again, they're all in on just using the graveyard as a resource. This will be perfect there. And just generally, like I've been saying, this card could be good in almost any build just because there's such a graveyard theme going on within this set. Demonic Tutor, one of the original Magic cards and one of the more powerful cards within this set. Yes, it can fit into any build. I don't have to tell you how good this card is. Searching your library for what you need when you need it, even at sorcery speed, is going to be incredible for 2 mana. Play this no matter what you're doing. Entomb. Okay, it's another rare, and you won't see a ton of it, but what a great way to set up reanimation. For just 1 black at instant speed, you go into your deck and you take out the best creature, and you throw it in your library, and you get ready to reanimate. You're halfway there already. That's pretty sweet, right? But you have to look at it this way. Maybe this is best in an Orzhov deck where reanimation will be most achievable, but you can reanimate, honestly, just in black, so you can use this in a number of different builds. And remember, reanimation targets don't even have to be castable. You could put a great creature in your deck, which is not even on color for what you're doing, if you have enough ways that you feel like you're going to be able to reanimate it. So keep that in mind. Also, you don't even have to reanimate with this card. There's a lot of ways to take cards from graveyard to hand. We just saw one a few moments ago. You could use this as the first step in a roundabout tutor if reanimation doesn't pan out. Fume Spitter. At face value, I look at this card and say it's probably not doing enough in this set. However, Orzhov is pretty interesting because in white, you're going to find a lot of ways to juggle some of these smaller creatures. And between what black can already do anyway, yeah, you know what? If I can play this maybe 2, 3, 4 times over the course of the game, it becomes a little more interesting. Ghoulcaller's Accomplice. This is a sweet 2/2 for 2. Bear with upside. I'll play this all day long. You need those curve fillers. Don't forget your 2-spot. This is a very fancy set. It's real easy to get caught up in the combos and all the crazy things you can do and forget to put 2, 3 drops in your deck. And those are still going to be very vital for your success. You need cards like this. You're going to play it. You're going to love it. 2/2 for 2. And when it's in the graveyard, and maybe it gets there through mill or some other way, but if it's in there, it costs more, but you still get the opportunity to get a 2/2 creature. You get something out of it, which is very nice. Now, also remember, though, there are a lot of strategies that really depend on a lot of stuff in your graveyard, especially Golgari. So if I start taking stuff out of my graveyard too soon, it might actually hinder my deck ultimately. So just keep that in mind when you're building and when you're going through a game, because if you have a lot of delve cards or something like that, it might not be worth getting the 2/2 if it means you can't delve when you want to. Ghoulsteed, very persistent card, which can be annoying for an opponent, but even though that's always good, maybe it's better in this particular set that it's a discard outlet out of the graveyard. Simply, I could discard things like Madness cards, especially in Rakdos colors. You'll have a lot of opportunities for that. Discarding the reanimation target, maybe an Orzhov is an option. Just generally, in Golgari, discarding anything really to delve, for example. Another card that works in a number of strategies. Golgari Thug, and again, another card that might be good in multiple strategies. Surprise, surprise though, maybe best in Golgari. Those colors would take the most advantage of the Dredge 4, and the ability might be a little better there too when you can activate it, which could be difficult from time to time. It could be good in like Dimir too, of course, if you have a Laboratory Maniac plan or something like that going on, Dredge will be fine there too. Goryo's Vengeance, another rare that you won't see a lot of, but it's still very powerful under the right circumstances. First off, it does have splice onto Arcane, so I've been saying pay attention to those Arcane cards as we've been going through this week. Here's one of the reasons. But secondly, the one thing you got to remember, this only works on legendary creatures. So if you don't have legendary creatures or good ones to target, then skip this card. You don't want to play it. If you do, though, if you have a strong one, then yeah, bringing it from graveyard to play, even though you have to exile it at the end of the turn, could still be very good under the right circumstances, right? It is an instant, too, so it does work on the Eldrazi Titans. If one of those goes to the graveyard, you can use this before the shuffle effect happens. Now, those are mythic, and that's not going to happen very often, but you never know. That's the dream. Maybe this has some additional utility in Rakdos if you can sacrifice the creature for benefit before it has to be exiled, and then maybe you could even reanimate it again at some point. Grave Scrabbler. Not for every deck. If you don't think you can consistently play this for the mana cost, skip it. You don't want this in your deck. You don't want a 2/2 for 4. But if you're in Dimir colors, for example, where you know there's going to be a lot of discard outlets and a lot of milling going on, this could be pretty good. It will allow you to take a creature from the graveyard back to your hands, and as long as you have a lot of ways to get stuff in the graveyard, then wonderful. And the Madness, as long as you have the discard outlet, will be able to be achievable. This could also work pretty well in Golgari too. Worth noting that you can target an opponent with this ability as well. Perhaps they have a juicy reanimation target in their graveyard, you could force it back to their hand. Grave Strength, all about Golgari here. They want to populate the graveyard at all costs and take what's in that graveyard and use it to your advantage, and that's exactly what this card does for just 2 mana. You mill yourself some more, add up all the creatures, put +1/+1 counters on something you control, hopefully with trample or evasion, and just go to town. Again, could be good in other decks too, but this will shine in Golgari. Gurmay Angler. This is a powerful delve card if you can get it out fast. I do think that it's best in Golgari, even though it's going to be good other places too again, but that's the deck that's going to be able to fill the graveyard the quickest and most efficient. And if you can get this thing out pretty early in the game, it can be pretty devastating as a 5/5, and it's a common. You'll be able to find these. Now, the one thing to remember with Golgari, though, you're walking a tight line because you don't want to over-delve if you have cards in your deck that want cards in your graveyard, like a spider spawning or something like that. Or vice versa, you don't want to necessarily use a bunch of flashback cards or something and then not be able to delve when you need to. So it can be a pretty tight build, but I do think it can come together nicely. Now my second choice for this might be Dimir because I think they could get it out relatively quickly too. However, I think that deck is going to try to be a little more controlling and might appreciate a creature with evasion instead. Last Gasp, a very powerful removal spell here at common. Just costs 2 instant speed, -3/-3 to a creature. This is amazing. When you're drafting, it's hard to say that I would pick this up first being a common and considering how powerful this set is, but I do think this would be a high pick common for me. Liliana of the Veil. Alright, she's amazing. I don't know what else to say. She's a mythic. It's not going to happen a lot, but if you get this card, it's great. It plays into some of the strategy, sure. +1, each player discards a card. We've talked about Madness. We've talked about populating the graveyard for animation or for other effects. That's going to be good, perhaps, for you some of the time. But also, it might help your opponent, too. So keep that in mind. Other than that, though, you're not going to let that hold you back. 3 loyalty for 3. The -2 is very good. The -6, if you get there, is very good. Play it if you can. Mark of the Vampire. Okay, this is an aura. You don't see a lot of auras in black. Auras are really relegated more to white and green in this particular set. But if you're playing white-black or you're playing black-green and you have some aura strategies going on, well, here's one more you can throw into it. And you can use this on heroic creatures in either of those colors. Green has some hexproof. Blue even has a hexproof creature. That might work out. So if I can throw this on a hexproof creature or a heroic creature, yeah, I'm going to be pretty happy with this and I'll play it. If I don't have those things, I might skip this though. Even though it's a very powerful effect, this is a very powerful set and I don't want to be 2 for 1. That could put you back too far in this particular environment. Mikaeus the Unhallowed, another really, really good mythic here. This thing will be a bomb. The only drawback is just simply that it's 3 on color, so it's not very splashable, but as long as you can swing that casting cost, you're going to want to play this guy. He is great. 5/5 Intimidate. If a human deals damage to you, destroy it. That could be relevant sometimes, but other non-human creatures you control get +1/+1 and Undying. That's actually kind of awesome. I mentioned earlier that there's a payoff for some of these zombies, and not just zombies, but anything not human. This is it. It's not going to happen often, but when it does, card will be excellent. Mona the Unhallowed. First time in Pauper, this is now a common. And it's a very solid card, especially if you want to go a little wider, a little more aggressive. You get 2 2/2 black zombie tokens for just 4 mana. That feels pretty good. And you can flashback later, which is even better. And like I said earlier, sometimes if you mill a flashback card, it kind of feels like you drew a card pretty much. So there's nothing wrong with that either in those mill strategies. Ultimately, you might not play this all the time because it doesn't fit as well into some of the strategies we've been talking about today. But it is a solid way to develop your board presence, especially if you're being a little more aggressive, and that could happen at times with black-white or else black-red. Awful Snouts, and this is another card that's new to Pauper, as a matter of fact, and the key to this card is that Evoke right there. Playing this as a 2/2 for 3, even though it has flash, isn't super exciting. I mean, if you need a curve filler, it's fine, but that Evoke is what you really want to be doing because of all the graveyard shenanigans. If I play game 1 and my opponent's going to the graveyard a little too much for my liking, I'll sideboard this in as a way to slow them down. Olivia's Dragoon, another great discard outlet, and maybe more importantly, it's a 2/2 for 2. You know how I feel about that. So again, it's a great curve filler. You're just going to need this, even if you don't care about the discard outlet for some reason, which you probably will. But if you didn't, still very playable. And if you're in Rakdos, you're going to have more opportunity to play some Madness cards with this, perhaps. Again, just getting that reanimation target in the graveyard with white-black, or just getting anything in the graveyard with the Golgari colors. This has a lot of utility. Reanimate. It's a rare. You won't see a lot of it, but could you imagine getting this in the other rare Buried Alive? That would be pretty cool, huh? Now, if you don't, that's okay. Still a great way to reanimate something not just from your graveyard, but from any graveyard. You do lose life, and yes, you do have to consider that, but at the same time, usually it's not going to matter, especially if you can do it early in the game and get something that could potentially put away the game. Super sweet card here, and it's going to be best in Orzhov, but like I said, you can pull off reanimation in other colors too. Sanitarium Skeleton. I think this could be best in Orzhov because it's a small creature. You could juggle it a little bit. Obviously, it juggles even without any help, as a matter of fact. But you could get this into play and just keep yourself safe until you get that big reanimation to happen. It's going to be good in Dimir too because, of course, all the milling, it will get into your graveyard and you can still play it, which is cool. So this is just a very solid card generally for a lot of the strategies. But is it doing enough for you to play it all the time? No, probably not. You might just have better things. Shirai, Shizo's Caretaker. I like this one a lot for a couple different combinations. Rakdos, where you have more of the sacrifice for benefit going on. This could be good there. This could be good in Orzhov, again, because you can juggle some of those small creatures there. And of course, we've seen creatures today in black that play well with this, like Fume Spitter. Shriekmaw. This is just a classic card. Fantastic. It has Evoke, and I mentioned how you might be able to juggle that a little bit more in white, which is cool. But just generally, if you have access to this card, you're probably playing it. 5 mana, 3/2 of Fear, that's actually pretty good. And aside from that, when it enters the battlefield, destroy target non-artifact, non-black creature. Oh, and it has Evoke for 2 in a pinch if you need it. Awesome. Slum Reaper, another card that's new to Pauper, and yeah, sometimes you'll have better things and it might not make your cut, but it's okay, especially in Golgari. You play this, your opponent has to sack a creature, you have to sack a creature, even if it is just this. And it goes to populating your graveyard, which is never a bad thing. Again, once we get to green, you'll see more of those payoffs in a few days, but for right now, yeah, it's good there, and you could also play this out of the sideboard if your opponent is on reanimation or something like that. It just gets better if they don't have a lot of creatures. Songs of the Damned. You can get a lot of mana here, but you have to have something to do with it. Again, this is going to be a little bit better in Golgari, which is going to be creature heavy and also populating your graveyard pretty efficiently. That's where this could really shine, but you have to have something to do with the mana if you don't skip it. Spoils of the Vault. Here's another rare, and I'm not super high on this one. It's really risky. 1 black, instant speed. It's a tutor, so far so good. Sounds great, but choose the card name. You reveal cards until you get to that card. The cards revealed that way then are exiled, which I'd rather have them go to the graveyard, but, you know, what can you do? And then you take damage based on how many cards you revealed. In a 40-card deck, you could argue maybe later in the game, if you're trying to hit your one big thing, well, maybe it's worth it, but you're leaving yourself open to not only taking a lot of damage potentially, but also maybe even decking yourself or coming close to decking yourself. So I don't like that. I just feel like there's enough ways to lose the game. I don't need to make myself lose. Even though I would love to be able to tutor if I had the opportunity, I don't think this one's worth it. Tessigur, the Golden Fang, and here's another rare. Best in Golgari or Dimir, not only because you can use the ability in those colors, but also because it has Delve and you want to get this out early. Those are going to be the color combinations that will be able to populate the graveyard the fastest. Also, the ability is good. Even though your opponent gets to choose what cards you get, they can't choose a land, so they're going to have to give you something, and it also continues to populate the graveyard at the same time. Now, if you weren't playing in any of those colors, would it still be okay? Yeah, you know, it's a 4 or 5 Delve creature. It still might make your cut some of the time. It's just going to be a lot better if you're in those colors. Twins of Mauer Estate. If you're going to play this, make sure you can play it for Madness. You don't want to be playing no 3/5 for 5 in this particular environment. It's going to be a bad day if that happens. 3 cost, though, with Madness is a little bit different. Awkwardly, you might be able to get Madness to trigger the most in Dimir colors, and I don't know if Dimir really wants a 3/5 with no evasion typically, so that's strange, but there are times where this will work out. Maybe this could be best in a Rakdos build, for example. Unburial Rites, the most consistent way you'll find in black to reanimate, considering this is an uncommon. We talked about Resurrection and white being common, which is awesome. Well, this is pretty good too at uncommon. What's nice about this card, though, is that flashback cost, which is white, so it is still pushing you in the direction of Orzhov. But if you get this into your graveyard as opposed to in your hand, you can still use it as long as your target's in there. You're good to go. And you have the white mana, of course. So that's one way to look at it. If you're milling aggressively and you accidentally mill this into your graveyard, it doesn't matter. You can still reanimate. And that's phenomenal. So it does open up some options for you. This is going to be a great card to have in that strategy. If you're not in white, it's still playable. Like I said before, you can reanimate without having white in your deck here, but it just makes it a lot easier. Unholy Hunger. Good limited card, like nothing crazy here. Destroy target creature for 5 instant speed. Maybe not as amazing in this particular set because it's so powerful compared to like a standard set, but it's still good enough and you're going to play it and be real happy. Maybe you gain 2 life sometimes. If you do, cool. It's not super consequential though. Let's move into multicolor with some Rakdos. Garna the Bloodflame. Okay, I mentioned how these colors are interested in sacrificing for benefit. This is a sweet card. It has flash and for 5 it's a 3/3. And when this enters the battlefield, you get to return to your hand all creature cards in your graveyard that were put there this turn from anywhere. So if you sacrificed a bunch of creatures, you get another crack at them. They come back to your hand. They don't go back into play, unfortunately. But you are able to play them again, maybe do some more sacrificing, and just keep that loop going. That's actually pretty cool. Also in this set, milling will work and discarding will work. So if I discarded for benefit, those creatures will come back to my hand. If I milled some creatures into the graveyard, it's kind of like drawing cards. There's a lot of utility here in this particular environment. Also, it gives all other creatures haste, and there is some aggressiveness behind a lot of the red creatures. We'll see that when we get to red. You'll find a lot of haste there. You might actually find yourself in a Rakdos build that feels more aggressive from time to time, especially in sealed. Fulminator Mage. Now, this is a sideboard card in this set. I do like hybrid mana, but it doesn't mean you're going to play a 2/2 for 3. Now, if your opponent does have a problematic non-basic land, you're going to bring it in and be real happy. It's rare, so adjust expectations. You won't get it a lot. Murderous Redcap. Now, here's a card you really want to juggle, right? It has Persist, so it is actually a little annoying to begin with for your opponent, even if you're just playing fair. Comes into play, does 2 damage, then when it dies, it will come back to another damage, and it keeps that board presence that whole time. That's really good. Now, aside from that, in this set, you know you can exploit this, right? Rakdos can sacrifice it for benefit, bring it back, you do that a few times, take it from graveyard to hand, play it again. Eventually, it just becomes really, really annoying, right? Also, you know, white-black could do a little juggling with reanimation, for example. And don't forget, with -1/-1 counters, if you put a +1/+1 counter on a creature that has a -1/-1 counter, those counters just cancel each other out. A lot of people don't know that. If you didn't play during Shadowmoor, you might not be aware of that. But they both don't just sit there, they actually disappear. So that's another way to get maybe more utilization out of this if you have a card like Travel Preparations or something like that. Rakdos Shred Freak. Real nice aggressive creature here. It's cheap, it's fast. It really plays into the aggressive nature of red in this set, which we'll see more of later. But I think this might be better in Boros than Rakdos even. I think Boros can support something like this a little bit more consistently. Golgari Charm. I love the charms. They add so much versatility. If I can fit this into my deck, I will play it. I could see times, though, where I might have so many playables that it doesn't get there. That third module, though, makes it relevant even in a main deck, because regenerating each creature you control, that feels like it could be very relevant. You could make combat more profitable and surprise your opponent, or you could just simply protect one of your creatures that's being hit by a pinpoint removal spell. Now, the other 2 modules are more situational, but they could come in handy, and if I don't main deck this card, I'll have to remember that it's in my sideboard if I come across some small creatures or a problematic enchantment. Lord of Extinction. If you're lucky, you might find this mythic, and of course, in Golgari colors, this card is going to be kind of crazy. Golgari is trying to populate the graveyard with as much as it can. This could be a very large creature. Now, it doesn't have evasion, but at some point, it's not going to matter. Also, with all the graveyard shenanigans, your opponent might be populating the graveyard too. This thing could be huge. Maelstrom Pulse. Super efficient removal spell at rare for just 3. Even though it is 2 different colors and sorcery speed, it's still really good. Destroy target non-land permanent, so it gives you a lot of flexibility there. And also all other permanents with the same name, which could come into play from time to time, but in limited for the most part, you'll be happy to destroy 1 non-land permanent with this. Canker Abomination, another hybrid card here. This is actually coming to Pauper for the first time too. Within this environment, I don't think this is the greatest because it's a 6/6 for 4 if your opponent has no creatures in play. How often is that going to happen? Maybe from time to time, but even so, it doesn't have evasion, so if they do have some blockers later, it's not doing a whole lot right away. And most of the time, I mean, if your opponent has at least 3 creatures, this is just simply not worth it for 4 mana. So in this powerful environment, I don't think you're going to want to play this. Maybe I side it in if my opponent doesn't have a lot of creatures for some reason, or I have a ton of removal, I might play it. But other than that, I'll skip it. Alright, that wraps up part 3 of the set review. Tomorrow, we're going to take a little break and do our regular Market Watch video that we do every Saturday. On Sunday, we'll be back with part 4, though, which is the red cards. Monday, the green. And then on Tuesday, we'll wrap things up with the colorless. But until next time, hey, thanks for watching. Please remember to like and subscribe, and have a great day. Hey, thanks for watching. This video is made possible through the generous support of viewers like you on Patreon. Check out the description below for links to our Patreon page as well as our Amazon affiliate store, where a small percentage of all sales will also help support the channel. Finally, if you haven't had a chance yet to subscribe, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of the new videos on Heroes and Legends. Talk to you again soon, and have a great day.